Jacklyn and Callie Kennedy, the co-founders of the Life is Worth Living Foundation, join us. They show us how you can find a way to build something super meaningful out of a really devastating event. We know the struggles can get heavy in life, but there are ways to adapt, honor, and form an amazing mission. Listen in and hear our guest stories, their mission, insights regarding navigating extremely tough moments, and resources. So tune in.
Through that tragedy taught me life is finite. You really have a short window to take what it is from life that you want and enjoy it.
You can go back to that day, February 18, 1990, and change what happened. My honest answer is I wouldn't change it.
You're just going to have to go through it, and your strength is going to be found in simply going through it and being authentic and real in the process.
I was talking with my palliative the care doctor today, and she turned around to me and she looked at me and she was like, do you think that you'll eventually beat this? And I was sort of like, yeah, that's probably what I'm trying to do.
No, nothing will ever take away the pain of my daughter not being here. It's my reality.
Well, I know what my body's going to do to me. I've got a wheelchair in my future. But you know what I've been looking for?
What's that?
One with off-road wheels.
Just remembering me as I am, happy and energetic and full of life, no matter what.
You can expect a life to kick you in the teeth, but you always get back up, no matter what, and you just keep going.
Living Adaptive with Scott Davidson.
Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome back. We have a really good episode today for the Adaptive Tribe. But before we jump into that, in case you don't know, head over to livingadaptive.com to find previous episodes, show notes, contacts for guests, links to social media accounts, and a bunch of other good stuff. So go there. All right. Today we have on the very powerful foundation, Life is Worth Living. The co-founders are incredibly inspiring and their mission is bold. We will talk about some really incredible things the org does and some insights they provide, but we also will talk about some heavy subjects, including depression and suicide. So I wanted to give a quick heads up. If you're in a bad place, then please reach out and get help. We will have resources in this episode, and you can also turn to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. People for sure do care, and this includes us here. So check the show notes for these resources. So let's jump into this. Jacklyn and Callie Kennedy are on the line. They are the co-founders of Life is Worth Living Foundation. What's up, Jacklyn and Callie? Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
For sure. We got to jump into this. This is a very, you delve into the most serious of subjects, and we'll get into that in 1 second. And my audience has gone through, a lot of people have gone through, or they're supporting somebody that has gone through something really significant, a really significant change of status in life, whatever it may be. And so you're very fitting for this episode, especially the theme we've been sticking to this spring, going into the summer. But you run the organization that is called Life is Worth Living. And I want to jump into this first, and then we're going to get more into your story. What is Life is Worth Living, and what is the mission of this nonprofit?
So, yeah, we started our nonprofit organization a few years ago now, and it is our mission to reduce the stigma and spread awareness about the topics of suicide and mental illness. And, yeah, we started it 2.5 years ago, but we've been speaking on these topics for almost 14 years now. So,
yeah. So we lost our sister Brianne to suicide August 31st, 2004. And it was about a year and a half after we lost Brianne. We were in a health sciences class, and our teacher asked us to come up with a presentation about a chronic illness. So Callie and I actually decided that we would talk about depression. And so we stood up in front of our classmates and we talked about depression, mental illness, mental health, and we shared our story about Brianne.
And so after we were done, we had to teach for an hour about this topic, and our teacher, they always would take the students out in the hallway and obviously discuss what you did good, what you could improve on, so on and so forth. And it was actually from her suggesting that maybe we consider taking our speaking further. And then from there, we kind of decided to do it and created a presentation, and ended up from the time we were 15 until we were 21. We kind of traveled around mostly Saskatchewan, our home province in Canada here, and spoke to a lot of high schools and shared our story. And that's kind of how Life is Worth Living was born.
Yeah. The name Life is Worth Living came from, well, when we started to do this, we spoke with our mom and just said, we need to we need to come up with a name. Like, what are we going to call our presentations? And we didn't know. And she was reading a book at the time, and I believe it was something in the book that she saw, and she was like, "What about life is worth living?" And we're like, yes, we love that. And so after we did our presentation for our classroom, we actually went up to our mom afterwards, after we were approached by our teacher, and we asked her, I remember we sat her down at the island here in our gym, and we said to her, like, "Mom, like, we have something to ask you." And I think she was kind of taken back a little bit, because she was like, "Oh my gosh, what are they going to ask me?" And we asked her that day to go back to the day that I lost Brianne, because we wanted to go through the details and just kind of what we experienced again, just so we could have our story and, I guess, portray it, or not portray it, but tell it in a way that all of us
thought was appropriate to share.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how Life is Worth Living was born.
How old were you when Brianne passed? Jacklyn and Callie, how old were you?
So we're actually twins.
Mm-hmm.
So we were 13 years old at the time. Brianne was only 19, and then we have a younger sister, Shayla, well, and she was only 5 at the time.
What do you remember being the most difficult thing when you're going through something like this?
Honestly, I think one of the things that stands out for me the most, there was a lot of fear in those moments. Obviously, there was a lot of sadness, but also a lot of fear, because being only 13 years old, it was hard to kind of comprehend how our older sister could have done that. Suicide wasn't something that we knew a lot about. Obviously, we knew what it was. We knew about mental illness and stuff. But I think because none of us had ever experienced it, especially to that degree, it was just devastating and a lot of fear.
Well, because mental health and mental illness were topics that were discussed openly within our home before Brianne passed away. We knew she suffered from depression. And so after she did take her life, our mom suffers from depression as well. Mm-hmm. And so I remember us, before we were going to bed one night, we were terrified that, Brianne was depressed, and in our minds, we're 13 years old. So our mom also struggles with depression. So was she going to take her life too? So like Callie said, just a lot of fear, just with obviously the traumatic experience that we went through, but then the fear of losing other people potentially to suicide.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's a big fear. That's a probably pretty normal fear to have in that situation. What did it take to get Life is Worth Living Foundation to where it's at right now?
I think it's just taken a lot of vulnerability, honestly. Yeah. Being willing to open up and be open about our story and Brianne's story. And I think that some of the most important organizations that I know of have grown from people opening up and sharing some of their darkest and scariest times of their lives, and some of those the worst moments of their lives, because I think they're really learning and teaching moments for us to grow as people and teach us about life and the things that are really important, right? So not only has losing Brianne kind of made us very passionate, obviously, about spreading awareness on suicide and mental illness, but also on making sure that we are living a life that we feel is worth living, and that kind of honors Brianne since she's no longer with us.
Yeah. And I feel like we do that through our Life is Worth Living organization, because we have said many times, and we've talked about it, over the past 14 years since we've lost her, we've done so many things in memory of Brianne. But the most important memorial that matters the most is how we choose to live our lives. And we choose to be mindful every single day of what makes our life worth living. And we thank Brianne for this. And although losing Brianne was one of those horrible, awful, life-changing moments, we decided to bring something good out of it. And we decided to make a difference and to share our story. And it's also something that we were able to do together, right? So we were able to feel united also at the same time, especially as sisters. So it just felt like we were moving, because I feel like too, after you lose someone, sometimes you feel like you're at a standstill. And by speaking about what we went through and starting our Life is Worth Living organization, we were putting our feet in front of each other and we're moving forward. So
you deal in a very significantly difficult subject matter area. Does working in this field and talking about your story ever just break you down?
I think it depends, or for me personally, I think it depends on the time of year and, well, too, how often you are speaking of it. Like, for example, this coming May, we're doing a lot of presentations because it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And actually tomorrow we're starting to do some presentations, and we have 4 booked here in the next 2 days. Mm-hmm. And it's actually Brianne's birthday here on April 30th. And we will be doing a presentation on her birthday, which I'm not sure if it was a good idea or a bad idea. But so there's months and there's days that I'm more emotional and more, I don't know, it seems to, sometimes I can do our presentation or I can talk about it with not a lot of, with emotion behind it, but I can be composed. And then there's other times where it's like I'm back to day one of losing Brianne, and the grief is so heavy, and it feels like I just lost her.
Wow. Okay. That's what I was going to say. What's what sticks out about the grieving process that people misunderstand, that they might not understand, is what I should say?
I think that it doesn't really matter how much time has passed. It's still going to come in waves. I'm not sure if any of your followers follow along on our Instagram, but I wrote a post recently because I was in Mexico on the beach and literally sitting there enjoying myself, reading a book, relaxing, not thinking about anything back home. And I see these 2 girls walk by. They were clearly sisters. One was probably about 19 and then the other a bit younger, and could just see the little sister looking up at her sister, and they were walking and laughing, and it just took me back. Like, it just catches you off guard, right? So I think it's just knowing that grief it's an ongoing journey, and it's not going to end, because your love for that person will never end. So as long as you love them, it's always going to be something you have to experience. What we've kind of learned is to just let the grief in and accept it and welcome it and acknowledge it, and cry if you need to cry, laugh, watch home videos, do whatever you need to do to remember that person and appreciate that the reason you feel that way is because you did have such a great love in your life.
Mm-hmm. And just talk about it. Like, after we lost Brianne, being only 13 years old, we didn't want to talk about it. And it was our parents, or we didn't want to talk about Brianne maybe necessarily. We were grieving and we were hurt, but my mom and my dad, they wouldn't stop talking about Brianne, and they kept her memory alive. And so we felt comfortable. It was comfortable talking about Brianne, and we talked about her like she was dear, right? Because she's always going to be a part of our lives. It doesn't matter that she was only a part of my life for 13 years. So I think having our parents stop talking about her made us realize, like, it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to also talk about the way that she left this world as well.
Going through this grieving process, you have a lot of insight, and it's not just a grieving, but you also have insight. You go out and speak to schools, and you have a message to send about life is worth living, but also you have a message about techniques and resources that are appropriate during these situations. What have you found to be 1 or 2 of the best resources when somebody's just like, they just can't get out of that rut, they can't get going?
For myself, I personally actually struggle with anxiety and depression. So I went through a period in my early 20s where I struggled quite a bit. And 2 of the things that I found the most helpful were counseling it has made a huge difference, and it's something I continue with even today, even if it's only checking in every few months. But it is that I would recommend to anyone, even if you are in a good place in your life. And then the second one I would say is probably journaling. It's something that I know our older sister did a lot of, and it's something that my sisters and I have all done too, kind of throughout high school and throughout our lives. It's just a good coping mechanism to kind of let out some of those negative feelings that you're maybe feeling and get them out on paper and just let them go.
How do you honor those that are lost to suicide? You talk a little bit about this, but how do you honor in your way?
I think it goes back to that piece, like we said, just choosing to live a life worth living. So just being mindful every day of what makes our life worth living, and also just living each day, just being grateful for all the things that we have and who we are surrounded by and the amount of love that surrounds us.
I also think too, there's the piece, we have our apparel, which I think can kind of honor those people as well, or even honor the people who might be struggling. Because the one nice thing I found about our clothing is that everyone can kind of relate to the message on some level or another, and it allows them to share their own story because they connect to it in some way. So it's kind of that piece that allows everyone to honor their own story, to honor maybe the people they've lost to suicide, and to be able to spread their own awareness.
I love your merch. I love your merch. I do.
Thank you.
You have an ability to brand very well, and I think you did a good job. And you stick out. You stick out in social media. That's how I found you. Is you stuck out in social media with your ability to brand what you're doing. Your message is much more important than a brand, of course, but you did a really good job doing that. How did you guys learn how to get that off the ground? For those that are listening, we have a lot of listeners that do want to run or run nonprofits.
Oh gosh, if you want to know how our social media page started, actually. So our younger sister was a lot more involved when we kind of started our social media. She's 20 right now, and
she would have been 18 years old at the time, I think. Yeah, it was 2 years ago, so 18.
Yeah, so it was her idea actually to start the social media pages, and Jacklyn and I were like, are you sure? Like, I don't know, I've never ran anything related to social media. I post my own personal stuff, but I'm not, like, it seems like that might be a lot of work kind of thing. And Shaylin was like, oh no, it's fine, like, whatever. And kind of once we got into it, I don't know, it was kind of just like,
it just kind of, again, it kind of spurred out of nothing. Like, in terms of our clothing too, we 2 years ago it was, I think, in December, I reached out to Callie and to Jacklyn, and I said, we hadn't been speaking. And so I said, you know what, you guys, like, I feel like we need to do this. We need to get back into this. We need to start speaking again. So we revamped our presentation and our story and stuff. And then we actually spoke. Our first presentation was at the high school here in Kindersley, where we're from. And so we spoke here. But before we did that, I messaged them because I love clothes. And I'm like, you guys, how cool would it be if we had matching T-shirts while we were speaking? So actually, that's kind of where it came from. And I said to the first order, we had to order 24 units in order to place this order. So I was like, you guys, we'll be able to sell 24 T-shirts for sure. Like, we'll make our family members buy them. Like, we can do this. And then our sister was like, we should start a social media page. So we did. And then once we were on social media, then we were overwhelmed with messages. We honestly, we sold so many T-shirts within the first 2 to 3 months.
It was hard to keep track of until we got our website up and going, and our website's been a lifesaver for that now. But yeah, I don't know. I think kind of the most important thing is we've tried to always write stuff. I love, like, aesthetically pleasing feeds, but for me, when I find lots of good Instagram pages that I follow, I love reading their content and their messages. And so for me, that's kind of the piece that I really enjoy about our page, and it's kind of an outlet for us to be able to share. And then I love when people comment and we can connect with them, and if they relate, because I find when I find people on social media, and if I can relate to like what they're saying, or I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's like they stole the words right out of my mouth, right? So that's just we've just kind of tried to stick to like who we are and the life that we kind of try to live for ourselves and the way we live our life. And it's been interesting too to allow it to be a platform sometimes for other people to be able to share their stories. So yeah, it's Instagram and Facebook, they're kind of a whole different world. I'm not really sure exactly how all the algorithms and that stuff works, but we kind of just went into it with a mindset of we don't really care about how many followers we have. That's not really the important thing to us. The important thing is that if one person reads our message that day that needs to read it, and it encourages them to reach out and get help, or it changes their day for the better, then we are doing kind of what we've set out to do. So, yeah.
You operate from a position of vulnerability. That's on your Instagram. That's everywhere. You're very, a lot of people wouldn't be this brave to be out there. Do you think that being that you were 13 when it all got seriously real for you around your household, that the stuff that you feared, those fears went away and you just wanted to get real to make a difference?
I do. Yeah. And our parents are kind of the same way. They were always very open and vulnerable and sharing about Brianne and being open about our story. So I think having that as them as role models
really made a difference for us. Yeah,
for sure.
What do you think Life is Worth Living is going to do, like down the road? Where do you girls see yourselves?
We want to change the world, and we want to change the way that people view mental illness. And we're going to do that through Life is Worth Living, and we're going to do it as 4 sisters. And we know that Brianne is always by our side, and she's with us every step of the way. So we're very passionate about this, and we're not going to stop until, well, probably until we're 95 and gray and with a cane.
Awesome. What do you think is causing so much depression nowadays, especially for the young?
Yeah, I think social media can be so great because you can connect with people from all over the world, but I think it can cause a lot of heartache for people as well. And we talk about it in our presentation, but comparison kills. It's hard when you're looking at someone's Instagram feed, for example, and you kind of have to step back and say, okay, this is literally a snapshot from their day, from their 24-hour day. This is 1 second that picture took to be taken. And, everyone kind of curates their feed to what they want it to be, and to just realize that it's a highlight reel, and to not compare your life, to not compare what you look like, what point of your life you're at, because everyone has a different life path. And, I think we need to kind of celebrate that we are all unique and different and follow our own paths. Yeah. But I think a lot of times we just got Facebook at the very tail end of high school, and I can't imagine having all of that stuff when I was 13, 14.
Yeah.
We had MSN, and that was about the extent of it. So,
and just to like with thinking of being kind to, like when you're on social media and you type or write anything, like I feel like as kids and even so many adults do it, you don't really think about the things that you type or write. And we really need to think about what impact we are leaving on the world and what impact that will have on that person. And so if you are going to utilize social media, then choose to be kind and show compassion and just write kind things, not mean things.
I wonder, like you said, you made the statement, like it is a snapshot. It's a few seconds of the day. For me, I'll take 55 takes on a picture and be like, I think the gut's not there, like everything to make it portray something at times that I wanted to portray, my best self. But most of the day isn't like that. And I do think that comparison is really rough. I did not have Facebook in high school. We had like AOL Instant Messenger. That was just talk, nothing intense, nothing crazy. And this era is really wild. it's kind of like, it's like a whole new frontier because that's the way it's going. I was watching Instagram videos, not just Instagram, but YouTube videos and, of some personalities out there that I've recently interviewed, and next to, like, as soon as a person pops up on the screen, there's their hashtag or there's their, name that you can link to and see everything about their life in an instant, everything at least that they want to portray about their life in an instant. And having that there, that I don't know, it just seems really rough in some ways because it could really backfire for people that are watching this and expecting that life is supposed to be that way.
Yes, that is it's very, very true. Yeah.
How do you deal with expectations of life? Like, a lot of people get depressed seriously down because they expected things to be different. And how do you embrace the new norm, the present environment?
I think it's important to realize that you are kind of the only person who has control of your life and where it goes, right? Every decision kind of takes you down a new path. And if you don't like where your life is at, you have full control to be able to make changes in your life and implement them. No, they don't necessarily happen overnight, but I think it's important to be able to have a support system that when you are feeling like you're in a place that you don't want to be in, that you can reach out and discuss how you could make changes to kind of get to the point you want to be at.
Yeah. And I think self-reflection is a huge piece too. And just being able to sit down with yourself and asking yourself the question, like, is this really what I want for my life? Or is this what I'm doing because I feel like it's expected of me? And just really getting to know yourself, and it comes down to speaking your truth and figuring out what you want for your life, because it's your life.
After all this intense work you've done, research, being out there, knowing, you know, what situations are like, and you've seen some dark stuff, you've seen a lot of great stuff too. But if you could go back to yourself back in 2004, around that time, what would you say to yourself as you're weathering something so difficult?
I would tell myself to be kinder towards myself. But actually, I was thinking about this as I was driving to Saskatchewan yesterday. I almost sometimes wish that I could go back to when I was 13 years old, because after we lost Brianne, I felt, and maybe it's because I was with my sisters, but I felt almost sometimes I felt more brave, and I had so much courage to talk about what I was going through. And not that I don't have that now, but there is that piece of me that sometimes it's like, oh, am I being too vulnerable? And I have to, I don't know. Sometimes I wish I could go back to my 13-year-old self and have the confidence maybe sometimes that I did when I was 13 and going throughout life. And yeah.
What do you think about existence in general? Like, after this situation, you seem to be so purpose driven. Do you see, like, a lot of people kind of waiting, and when I say waiting, like waiting in the water, not kind of like getting through it and just sitting there and not embracing the finality of things, that we eventually do lose the time here and we need to get active and get moving? Does that ever bother you?
You know, I think a lot of people are afraid of death, and you know, it's a fact of life. There's two things that happen most definitely in our lives. We're born and we're going to die at some point, you know, and that's just a part of living. So why not take every single moment in between those two timelines, in between those 2 points of your life, you know, and make the most of it, because unfortunately we don't know how much time we're going to be given on this earth. So yeah, it's kind of just not taking any minute for granted, not taking the time for granted that you get to spend with the people you love, getting to do the things that fill you up, just really appreciating and living in the moment and being present.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an experience? Do either one of you have an experience when you're out speaking or out talking with people, maybe one-on-one situations or big group situations, that really sticks out, that really changed you?
I do, actually. We, when we first started speaking, It was 2 years ago. We went to a school, and it was probably our, fourth or fifth presentation that we had done.
Yeah, once we got back into it.
Yeah, and so we were still feeling, or I was feeling still quite vulnerable about it. And because you always wonder, you put stuff out into the world, and, there's always that piece of you that wonders, are people... are people taking anything from it? Are they enjoying our presentation? Is it affecting them? Anyways, and so after we did our presentation, it was a couple days later, we had emailed the school and asked them for feedback, because we like to get feedback, just so we can put it up on our website. Mm-hmm. And I sent him an email a few times, and we never heard anything back. And so I said to Callie, oh my gosh, Callie, they must not have liked our presentation, and maybe they thought it wasn't impactful towards the students. We need to, at that point, we were using cue cards for our presentation. So I told Callie and Jacklyn at the time, I was like, we are getting rid of our cue cards because we need to amp this up. We need to be very professional. Anyways. And so we did that, and we kept speaking. But in my mind, I thought, wow, they really must have not liked our presentation. Anyways, about a year later, we did receive an email back from that person. And in that email, we didn't receive any feedback, but instead there was words validating why we are sharing our story and why we are doing what we are doing. He wrote us, letting us know that he had recently been through a deep depression, and had struggled with depression on and off throughout his life. And he in that email, he thanked us and said that life is worth living became a motto for them over the summer for him and his family. And that he wore his t-shirt every day, especially on the days that were very hard for him. Yeah. And he would look in the mirror, and it would remind him that life is worth living. And when we received that email back, I had chills and shivers reading it. And I actually cried, because I was like, this is why we are doing what we're doing, because it had impacted him. And maybe in that moment when I had emailed him for feedback, he couldn't find the words to write me, but obviously he was impacted by our presentation, and it helped him get through a really hard point in his life, which just meant the world to us, and just validated why we are doing what we're doing and why we share our story as sisters.
I imagine getting feedback is going to be more rare in your area because the stigma that surrounds mental health and depression especially. And then going as far as suicide, there's so much, the thoughts of it or whatever. And I imagine that getting feedback is going to be more rare because people are very shy and they don't want labels and things like that. So it's cool you did get some feedback, but there is a heavy stigma.
Yes. Yeah, there definitely is. And there's been a lot of moments when Jacklyn's in Europe, she lives there in the winter. And so sometimes I do speak by myself at schools, and a lot of times when I'm at a school, I will have a student come up afterwards, and either their friend or their boyfriend or their girlfriend is suffering and struggling, and they've tried to get them help, and they've tried to reach out to their parents, not usually their own parents, but their friend or someone in their lives' parents. And the overwhelming message they receive back is that they don't believe in mental illness. And this is something I've heard it so many times, and every time I hear it, it breaks my heart, because they're reaching out, they're making that first step that they're supposed to be doing, and they're reaching out and trying to get help, and kind of being told back that it's not real, right? So which is that stigma that still unfortunately exists. But it just breaks my heart that these kids are trying to get help, and then there is kind of the older generation that still grew up with that stigma that suicide was something we didn't talk about. People with mental illness, you shouldn't associate with them. They're crazy. They're right. All of those terrible things that they say. And so it's not only important to reach the youth, obviously, it's important to reach kind of everyone, because everyone could use some more education and awareness on all of it, and learn that it is okay to open up and talk about it. So
What has this done to your family as a unit? You seem like a really tight group. You're hanging out together, even though Jacklyn, that's you that goes to Europe, right?
Yes, yeah.
You do go far away from the family for a little bit, though. That is kind
I
of far.
do, yeah. Lots
do.
of FaceTimes.
Yeah, she does, unfortunately. My mom always asks, have you talked to Jacklyn lately? And I'm like, Mom, I literally talk to her every day.
Yeah. What are you doing over there, Jacklyn? What are you doing over in Europe? Are you just hanging out? What are you studying? What?
My husband actually, he plays hockey over there. So yeah, we've lived abroad now for 5 years, and now we're based in Germany, and we're heading back for 2 more years. So yeah, so it's kind of cool. I get to live in Europe half the year, and then I'm at home for half the year, and I work as a nurse here in Calgary.
Does he have all his teeth?
He does, but he has two fake teeth. So no, not. But
I do too. I got mine knocked out a little bit. So.
Did you?
Yeah. Yeah. I was just curious. I mean, hockey was big where I grew up, not where I'm located now, but that's cool. So he's like a pro hockey player, and you go over and you get to go on an adventure there. Could I ask you though, is he able to weather the discussions? 'Cause you're on the front lines all the time of something so, serious?
Yes. Yeah. He has been amazing and so supportive of, because I met my husband when I was 19 years old.
Oh, cool.
And so, yeah, telling him I don't think he had ever experienced losing or knowing someone who had lost someone to suicide, but no, he knows how to, weather the conversations. And
yeah, Jacklyn's actually met people too, like being over in Europe, and we've ended up sending some clothes over there for people that she's met, whether they're like fans of the team her husband's playing on, or so it's kind of cool, that connection as well. Yeah, our stuff ends up across the world. So
yeah, there was 2 fans of the team he plays for this year that actually they were so connected with our message that they both got tattoos on their arm. Yeah, of life is worth living, and just seeing that again, just really it's just amazing. And I get teary-eyed every time that something like that happens, because it's just to see what we've done and what we are doing. It just,
and have people to be able to connect with it so deeply it's
just amazing.
So our listenership, we talked about this earlier in the show, but our listenership has gone through, a lot of them have gone through very intense things. I think most notably recently, an episode aired with David Francisco, and David's an American Idol guy. He, very successful, and he went through a spinal cord injury, and he was one of the ones that weathered it so well and went through the process of an injury that was completely life-changing, life-altering. And he lives with so much uncertainty at times, and he just deals with it in his way, which is impressive. But what's your message to those that are sitting here listening right now, and they're like, man, it's dark. I don't think it's going to get better.
Honestly, one of the most important things I can say for people in those times is nothing is permanent. Nothing, a feeling can't last forever, right? And setting out to develop coping mechanisms that can get you through those difficult times, whether that's finding a support system, whether that's finding a support group to go to, counseling, journaling, exercise.
And I think the most important thing is to just talk about it, because I think lots of times when we are going through something hard in our lives, it's really hard for us to reach out, when really that's exactly what we should be doing, because the people around us will love us and support us, and they'll listen to us, and there will be somebody who will understand and who will sit there and listen. And so just, I think, talking and reaching out, you got to reach out, Yeah.
It's a long road that you've walked. You are young, I think 20s, maybe early 30s at most, for you and your siblings. And a lot happened in that time period. A lot went on in your lives. You had to grow up a lot faster than most. And you had to see a lot at that time. And it's pretty interesting to see your response. Your response is very different than I've seen with others. And it's neat to see your resiliency I don't know what made you most so resilient. It seems like your parents had a big impact, but what do you think was that made you so resilient during this process?
I think seeing how resilient Brianne was, I think that really made us strong. And after she did pass, we were able to read her journal entries, and we learned a lot more about what she had been through personally, and just to see how brave she was navigating her mental illness and the stigma surrounding her mental illness, and that she had the courage to wake up every day and, you know, to face that really just
kind of instilled the bravery in us, and she was never afraid to use her voice when she was alive. It wasn't something that she was afraid to share. Her friends were aware, her family was aware of the way that she felt. So I think kind of seeing her use her voice encouraged us to use our voice as well. And yeah, without her, like, she was obviously a huge influence in our lives, and still is today one of our biggest role models. And we look up to everything that she did in the short time that she was with us. So,
and the things that she taught us too. And Brianne was such a good listener, and she always made us younger sisters feel involved. Even Jacklyn being only 5 years old at the time when Brianne passed, like, we all have such fond memories of Brianne and the amount of time we spent with her, because she always included us, which I think as an older sibling is really incredible, because you know, some older siblings would maybe be like, I'm going to,
I'm not letting my little annoying sisters tag along anymore.
Yeah.
But she always did, and she always listened to us, and her being a good listener just made us realize how important our voices were from a young age, and the importance of using them.
You have good voices. When you say you have NPR voices, very relaxing. Like you set the mood, and it's like very easy to listen to you too. And I really encourage you to like get out there and start interviewing others that were in the same situation and building your audio tribe too. It doesn't just have to be Instagram and YouTube. You know, you can go on podcasts.
No, for sure. I honestly love podcasts. Podcasts all day at work. Like, I'm an engineer, so I end up doing a lot of like.
It sounds like you're doing
stuff.
a lot of work at work, listening to podcasts all the time.
Yeah, but when I'm doing like data entry stuff, it's like I throw in a good podcast, and like for an hour, I don't even realize how much work I got done, because I'm like, just focused and listening and kind of drown out everything else. I think podcasts are one of the most amazing things that.
They really are. And they can be so inspiring too. And they can just lift up your day. When I listen to a good podcast, I'm just like, oh, ready for the day, ready to take on the world.
How cool is the title of a podcast called like Life is Worth Living? Like, seriously, that's a great one. I'm downloading just based on the title alone. It's like saying, you know, we're going through, you know, shit can happen, bad shit happens, but we're going to find a way.
Yeah, yes, for sure.
Yeah, well, I think after we get off the phone here, we'll probably sit down and talk about it and see. It would be actually perfect for me because, well, living in Europe, I teach English when I'm abroad, but other than that, I have a lot of time on my hands. So,
can you play hockey too?
Gosh, no.
Okay, I was curious. Like, I don't know, it's in the blood up there, and
oh yes.
We grew up dancing, so
yeah. We're our hometown though. Like, we're from, well, obviously hockey is huge in Canada, so
really all we did in the winter was watch hockey.
We always
there was not much else to do.
So, but yeah, so it's funny that I ended up with a hockey player, but yeah, so definitely do not play hockey.
I got to go back to this though. Well, your mom and dad, do they get out and speak too, or do they kind of take more of a background and let the kids handle it?
No, they both, I would not in like a public way like we are doing, but if someone was to, like if my mom was to go for coffee with someone, like my mom will speak about her experience and what she's been through and try to help as many others as she can. Or if someone reached out to her in a heartbeat, she would help them. And same with my dad. My dad actually works for an oil field company in Alberta, and he does safety meetings all the time. My dad is he's hilarious, and well, he plays the guitar too, so he comes up with songs
that.
and stuff for safety meetings.
He loves writing safety songs for
What?
it's like a mixture of his two,
which I'm sure he enjoys. But
That's awesome.
He takes time to, at his safety meetings, to actually talk about mental health. And I know at one point got up in front of, I'm not sure how many men and women at his company and shared his experience with losing Brianne to suicide and just encouraged those to reach out and get help.
That's cool. I do want to hear one of his songs, another one, like a safety song about like don't fall or something like that.
Oh, he's got the ground disturbance blues.
Yeah, I would like to hear that.
And another one that's about H2S gas. So that one's pretty interesting. We'll have to get him to record them and post them, and we'll share them.
Yeah, my God, those are serious subjects for a song too. You know, what do you think is the best way people can like impact your organization, help it? The stuff you talk about impacts everyone, which is rare, but in this case, it really does impact everyone. Like how can we build life is worth living?
You know, I think if you want to support us, obviously we have our apparel. 100% of our proceeds from our apparel is used to fund Canadian mental health initiatives. Most of that money is donated to the Canadian Mental Health Association. So that's one way. Another way is providing an impact through using your voice. So whether you want to buy a piece of clothing and use that as like a starting point, because people will probably ask you what it means. So you can share our story, and then you can share your own and why you bought it and how you connected to it, right? Or even another thing that we kind of say is, we lose approximately one person to suicide every 40 seconds around the world with the number of suicides there are every single year. And so by using your voice for 40 seconds a day, you could prevent a suicide by just opening up and having those conversations and starting them. So it's easy to make an impact. It doesn't have to be a financial impact. It can literally just be raising your voice and spreading awareness.
Yeah. And I think another thing too is just doing partnerships as well. Just partnering, like we love partnering with other people, especially if they have the same goal at the end of the day. So if they are wanting to raise money and they reach out to us, then we love to collaborate with people and raise as much money as we can to put towards Canadian mental health initiatives.
I can't let you go without asking this. Your favorite resources. What are your favorite resources, Jacklyn and Callie, that you turn to when it gets rough?
Well, the ones I always recommend, especially when I go into schools, are Kids Help Phone. I think it's such an amazing resource, especially now that they have their texting line in addition to their phone line, because I feel like sometimes kids, I remember as a kid, I didn't even like to make phone calls. It always made me nervous. So it's kind of nice for them to have that texting option. They can still reach out. They maybe don't have to feel so scared to do it. I think that would be one of them. But once again, I have to say counseling over and over and over again. It's just been such an important resource in my life, and it still is today. And I think it's something I will continue to probably utilize for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And here in Saskatchewan and actually Alberta, where we are from, we have 211, it's called. And so you can either, well, in Saskatchewan, it's a website that you can go on, and it tells you all the different resources available. So it's a really easy website to navigate. And then as well in Alberta, actually in Canada, you can call. And so say if you yourself are suicidal, or if you're having thoughts of suicide, or you know a friend that is, you can call 211 and just get advice as to what to do and kind of how to handle that situation.
That's awesome.
And then obviously I always tell people as well, if you have any question at all of what to do, you're not sure what to do, you're in a situation that you've never been in, don't ever hesitate to call 911. Obviously, you guys have 911 in the States as we do up in Canada as well. So you will never regret dialing that number and getting help
Yeah.
So.
And I think another important point to touch on too, is just especially for the youth that's listening, is just to not, if someone does tell you that they are suicidal, to not keep it a secret, because you need to tell someone in order to keep your friend safe. And that's so important. And that's the thing we stress the most, is take the person seriously, because they, especially with youth, I feel like sometimes, often, again, it's the stigma coming into play. People think that, oh, that person is over exaggerating, they are seeking attention. That is not the case at all. They need your help. No one would ever say those words without having some meaning behind them. So you need to take that person seriously, and you need to call 911, or if you're a youth listening to this, you need to tell a trusted adult, because ultimately the more people that person who is feeling suicidal has behind them, the safer that they will feel, and the more likely they'll be able to get the help that they need. So that's so important.
To round this all out, what's the best way to hang out with you, contact you? How can people reach out to you?
Well, we're obviously on social media on both Facebook and Instagram, and our username's at Life is Worth Living, BCK. Those initials stand for Brianne Carol Kennedy, in memory of our older sister. We also have our website, which you can contact us through there as well by email. Our website is www.lifeisworthlivingbck.com. And we have more information on there about what we do, how to purchase our apparel, and just different information about, I guess, us, who we are, and what our mission is. So and what we're doing.
And we'll put that in the show notes, of course. We'll have it in the show notes. We'll have it on our website. We'll have it everywhere. You will be able to click it, go right there, follow along, buy some merchandise, supports a great cause. It looks good. They really do a good job. You guys do a really good job with your merchandise too. So I commend you for that.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And your message is wonderful. I want to say I'm so sorry about Brianne and what happened. I'm grateful your response. I think you have major impacts. So I do.
Thank you so much.
That means a lot.
And thank you for reaching out to us and just giving us this platform to
share our story.
Yeah.
All right, listeners, that's our episode. Remember, go to livingadaptive.com to find previous episodes, show notes, contacts for guests like this guest, links to social media accounts, and a bunch of other good stuff. So go there. Peace.